Hi, my name's Evelyn, and this year my parents beat me with a champagne bottle at my brother's birthday because I wouldn't hand over the deed to my $450,000 condo. But that wasn't the worst part. They'd already erased me from our family photos. They tried to sell my home without telling me, and when I fought back, they made a video calling me the traitor. I never thought justice would look like an empty house or a folded napkin left behind. But maybe that's what happens when silence speaks louder than loyalty. Before we begin, what time is it where you are? And have you ever had to choose peace over people who share your blood? Tell me below, because this story doesn't end the way you think. It was a warm Sunday evening in San Antonio, the kind where twilight stretches long and golden across driveways and blooming oleanders. I pulled up to my parents' house just as the valet opened the driver's door. My Toyota sedan, scrubbed clean inside and out, looked wildly out of place next to the BMWs and Teslas lining the cul-de-sac. I stepped out, brushing off invisible dust from my simple navy dress. No designer label, no statement jewelry, just clean lines and a tiny pearl stud I'd had since college. I clutched a neatly wrapped box, a monogrammed pen set for Dominic, and walked toward the front porch where laughter spilled out like champagne. The house had been transformed. String lights zigzagged across the yard. Live jazz hummed in the background, and the aroma of cedar-planked salmon wafted through the air. My brother Dominic, the oldest and brightest star in the Sullivan galaxy, was turning 40. The celebration was bigger than most weddings I'd been to. Inside, a young man in a tight vest and fitted slacks stood at a podium with a guest list. He smiled politely. "Name?" Evelyn Sullivan," I said, adjusting the gift bag in my hand. He scanned the sheet, then paused. His finger trailed down a column. "You're listed as +1 under the Sullivan family block." I blinked. "Sorry, what?" He turned the paper around, showing me. There it was, a carefully printed chart. Sullivan family followed by individual names. Dominic, Margaret, Walter, Camilla, even cousin Raymond and his 3 kids. Then, at the bottom, in smaller font, +1 guest to family. I forced a smile. "Guess I'm the lucky +1. He looked unsure. "Would you like a different tag? I can handwrite it." "It's fine," I said quickly. "Really?" I pinned the generic guest badge onto my dress right over my heart. It pulled slightly at the fabric, a crooked edge of irony. I hadn't worn a name tag since my first corporate mixer, and even then it didn't feel this heavy. I moved through the house, nodding hellos, ignored just enough to remember I was out of orbit here. The hallway was lined with family portraits in black lacquered frames. One in particular, Dominic in a tux, holding a trophy, with Margaret beaming beside him, was now center stage on a mirrored console. I looked closer. The picture had once included me. I remembered it. I was sure of it. But I wasn't there anymore. The ballroom doors were wide open. Crystal chandeliers dangled overhead like floating planets, casting diamonds of light across tables covered in silk. I scanned the place cards. My seat was near the back. Table 18. I walked toward it slowly, heels tapping softly against marble. Table 18 was tucked behind a thick pillar, right next to the kitchen door where servers came and went with trays clinking and the occasional shout of "hot plate." It was the noisiest, least desirable seat in the room. I might as well have been dining in the pantry. My place setting was slightly off, the silverware crooked, the napkin folded into a limp swan, drooping forward like it had given up halfway through the evening. I reached to adjust it, pausing as the paper-thin wing fluttered under the air from the swinging kitchen door. I sat down and exhaled. From my vantage point, I could barely see the head table, but I could hear everything. Laughter, toasts, the pop of another champagne bottle. Dominic was being hailed from every direction. "Our golden boy!" someone shouted. A woman in stilettos leaned over to kiss his cheek. Margaret stood beside him, beaming with the practiced grace of a political hostess. "This is our son," she repeated over and over to different circles of guests. "He just made regional VP in 4 years. Isn't that something?" she told an older couple beside her, placing her hand lightly on Walter's chest for emphasis, as though the news somehow belonged to them both. No one noticed me. Walter, my father, did glance over once. He caught my eye across the crowd, offered a slow nod, not a greeting, just an acknowledgement that I existed, and turned back to speak with his business partner. I picked up the water glass and sipped slowly, letting the chill anchor me. My hand brushed against the napkin again, that sad little swan, crumpled and lonely on fine china. Maybe they just forgot to list me properly. Maybe someone mixed up the chart. Or maybe, just maybe, I was never meant to stand out here. A server leaned over to clear the seat beside me. It had remained empty all night. "That one taken?" she asked. I smiled. "No, it's all yours." She gave me a sympathetic look, but said nothing, just took the plate and kept moving. I watched her disappear through the kitchen door, the soft swing of it closing behind her. Then the clinking of forks on glasses started, and the lights dimmed slightly as the spotlight illuminated the stage. A microphone screeched softly before settling. A voice, deep, familiar, spoke into the system. "And now, a few words from someone very special to us. Please welcome Evelyn Sullivan." I froze. My name echoed through the speakers, but not the way I hoped. The applause was still trailing off when I stood up, hesitant, confused. I hadn't prepared anything. I didn't know why I was being called forward. As I walked toward the small stage, heels clicking in rhythm with my racing pulse, I felt all eyes on me. Some warm, most indifferent, a few amused. Margaret gave me a smile I couldn't read. It was too polished to be warm. There was a microphone stand in the center and a spotlight just slightly too bright. I shaded my eyes, scanning the room for some kind of context. Dominic gave me a nod from the main table. Camilla's hand rested perfectly posed on his. Walter sat with one arm draped behind Margaret, grinning like he was watching a show he already knew the ending to. I reached the mic, waiting for someone to hand me a card, a script, anything, nothing. Then the screen behind me lit up. A video montage started rolling. First, a picture of Dominic in a Little League uniform, holding a bat bigger than his arms. Then a middle school science fair, him pointing to a cardboard volcano. High school graduation, college internship, a shot of him shaking hands with the mayor, then blueprints, his first architecture project. Narration began. My mother's voice. "From the very beginning," Margaret said, "Dominic was destined for greatness. He was the light in every room, our foundation, our pride." Then Walter chimed in, his voice unmistakably proud. "We always knew he had that spark, the kind of brilliance you don't teach. It's born in you." I watched silently. My jaw tightened. I watched the video silently, hands clasped in front of me, smiling, because the alternative would be giving them a reason to say I was too emotional. Not once did they mention the $75,000 loan I'd wired Dominic during his startup years. The weekends I'd driven down from Dallas to help him rebuild client decks when his software kept crashing. The night I slept on the floor of his unfinished office to make sure the carpet installer showed up. There was no trace of me in this glossy version of our family history they had edited for the crowd. The video ended with a splash of gold cursive across the screen, a legacy in the making. Polite applause followed. Some clapped genuinely, others out of obligation. I nodded faintly, turned back toward the mic. And then Margaret rose from her seat, clapping as she approached me. "And now," she said brightly, "a few words from the ever-thoughtful little sister." I blinked. So that's what this was. A staged speech, a performance they hadn't rehearsed me for. I glanced down at my dress, suddenly self-conscious. My hands were sweating. I leaned into the mic. "It's a beautiful night," I began. "And Dominic, you've always had a gift for making the room light up around you." That's when she did it. Margaret interrupted me, laughing like we were all in on the same joke. "Oh, honey," she said sweetly, "tell them. Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed over the condo key tonight?" The room went still. It wasn't the kind of silence that gently settles over a room. It was vacuum silence, an absence of sound so sudden it sucked the breath out of the space. Someone coughed. A phone camera clicked. My throat went dry. I looked at her, trying to figure out if this was real, if this was a test. "What?" I asked quietly. Not into the mic, just to her. She kept smiling. "You know," she continued, "the place in Austin, that lovely 2-bedroom condo you've got. You're always traveling for work, and Camilla and Dominic are newlyweds. It just makes sense." Walter chimed in from his seat, voice booming. "Come on, Evelyn. It's just a formality. You don't need all that space. It's not like you're using the guest room." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a maneuver, one designed so that no would sound like betrayal. The guests weren't sure how to respond. Eyes darted, heads turned. Dominic looked down at his plate. Camilla's lips tightened. She didn't look surprised. "This wasn't agreed on," I said into the mic. My voice had a sudden edge to it, sharp, unplanned. A few gasps, some of sympathy, others embarrassment. Margaret waved a hand, still smiling, like we were performing an improv skit. "Don't be dramatic, sweetie. It's just a gesture, a symbol of love." I could feel my chest tightening. My fight or flight instincts were roaring. Every cell in my body wanted to scream, to list every sacrifice, every late-night call, every time I bailed Dominic out of a mess. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at my mother. Really looked at her, at the practiced smile, the narrowed eyes that scanned the crowd for approval. This had been planned, down to the moment. Instead, I stared at Margaret, at the way her face was stretched into a mask of charm, at the way her eyes watched me, not with affection, but with calculation. This wasn't spontaneity. This was strategy, a public ambush disguised as a celebration. The audience fidgeted in their seats. Someone whispered, "That's bold." A woman near the back muttered to her friend, "She's not really going to say no, is she?" I set the microphone down gently. It made a soft thud. My hand trembled slightly as I smoothed the skirt of my dress. And then I smiled, quiet, controlled. The kind of smile that says, "I see exactly what you're doing, and I won't forget it." I stepped off the stage, heels clicking softly on the marble. I hadn't made it more than a few steps before I spotted Walter standing near the dessert table. His arms were rigid at his sides, jaw locked tight. He wasn't watching the cake. He wasn't greeting guests. He was watching me, and that was never a good sign. Margaret stood just behind him, champagne flute in hand, whispering something under her breath. Her face wasn't laced with concern. It was dripping with disgust. "She just embarrassed us," she hissed to him, loud enough that I wasn't sure if she didn't realize I could hear or if she wanted me to. I slowed, not because I was afraid, but because the air around me had changed. It was thick, charged, like a storm was waiting behind every smile. I looked around for someone, anyone, who might intervene. Camilla? She looked away, jaw clenched. Dominic? He stared down at his glass like it held the secrets of the universe. Then, before I could speak, before I could move, Walter stepped forward and grabbed the neck of the champagne bottle on the table. I assumed he was refilling his drink until he turned, fast, and swung. The base of the bottle caught me just above my right temple. There was a sickening crack, then white, not a blackout, more like a blinding flash that refused to fade. I stumbled, a warm pressure blooming at the side of my head. My hand flew up instinctively, fingers coming away wet and red. There were gasps. A woman shrieked. A phone camera clicked. "You ungrateful brat," Margaret snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We brought you into this world, gave you everything." I bent slightly, palm still to my scalp. The pain was sharp, yes, but it wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the humiliation, the way the guests watched, but did nothing. A few guests began to step back, eyes wide, unsure whether this was still part of the strange family spectacle or something far darker. No one stepped forward. Even Raymond, my cousin from Walter's side, the one who used to sneak me candy at reunions, froze like a man caught in the middle of a movie he didn't want to be part of. Finally he stuttered, "Someone call the police." His voice cracked, but still, he didn't move. I straightened slowly, careful not to show the tremble in my knees. My pale blue dress was now streaked in red, blooming across the fabric like a warning. The floor beneath me shimmered, blurring from tears, or blood, or both. "Is she okay?" a woman whispered near the fruit table. "She's being dramatic, right?" another murmured. "No," came a flat reply from a voice I couldn't place. "That man hit her. I got it on video. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I walked through the stunned crowd, past Dominic, who now sat rigid, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He didn't meet my eyes. Didn't move. Camilla reached to touch his arm, but she didn't rise either. Outside, the night air hit me like a wall. Warm, heavy, silent. No one followed, not even to pretend. My fingers fumbled with my phone. Uber. Confirm pickup. I barely registered the make of the car when it arrived, only the look in the driver's eyes, wide, hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether I was bleeding or broken. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. "Hosp," I mumbled. Then, more clearly, "Hospital, please." The ER smelled like bleach and distant sadness. Under the humming fluorescent lights, I sat on a cold cot, a folded bandage against my temple, filling out forms with a pen that kept slipping from my fingers. A nurse, kind-eyed and quiet, asked, "Anyone coming to stay with you tonight?" I shook my head. Numbered just me. She gave a nod that said she understood far more than I'd said. "You're not the first," she murmured, voice soft, reassuring. I leaned back and stared up at the toothpaste-colored ceiling tiles. That's when it hit me. Not the pain, not the embarrassment, but the clarity. That was the last time I would show up for any of them. By the time I got back to Jasmine's apartment that night, everything ached. My scalp throbbed with every heartbeat, a dull reminder of how quickly the evening had unraveled. She left the guest room light on for me, a soft towel folded neatly at the foot of the bed, and a steaming mug of chamomile tea resting on the nightstand. I didn't touch any of it. I just collapsed into the sheets, shoes still on, and closed my eyes. Not to sleep, just to shut out the memory of glasses clinking and judgmental eyes, of laughter turned silence, of blood on marble floors, morning filtered through gauzy linen curtains and the chirp of a neighbor's sprinkler. For a brief moment, I forgot where I was, but the throb behind my left eye returned like a cruel alarm clock, snapping everything back into place. I sat up, stiff and sore, and reached for my phone. Dozens of notifications, none from Margaret, none from Walter, not even from Dominic, who once promised I was the most important person in his life. But there were messages from old coworkers, acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them had seen the clip. Yes, someone had filmed it. The moment my father hit me with a champagne bottle, uploaded with shaky hands and gasps in the background, red against blue silk, my body stumbling sideways, eyes wide with disbelief, I tried to delete it, again and again. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I showered slowly, wincing with every tilt of my head, brushed my teeth with trembling hands. Then I reached for my purse, a grounding ritual, wallet, phone, lip balm, receipts, half-eaten granola bar, all accounted for. But something was missing, the spare key to the condo, the one I always kept clipped inside the side pocket. I turned the purse upside down, scattering everything onto the guest bed. Nothing. Then I remembered. A week ago, after a family dinner in Westlake, Walter had scooped up my bag by mistake, or so he claimed. "Thought it was your mother's," he'd said with a sheepish smile. I hadn't thought much of it. Until now, the vibration of an incoming call startled me. Unknown number. I answered on autopilot. "Hi, Miss Evelyn. This is Jeanette from HomeQuest Realty. Just confirming our 2 p.m. appointment for the walkthrough at your condo today." I blinked. "What?" "We have you scheduled to meet at the entrance unless you'd prefer we use the lockbox." "I didn't schedule anything," I said slowly, dread blooming in my stomach. A pause. "Oh, the listing's under your name. A Mr. Walter is listed as co-signer, but the listing came from your property title." My heart dropped. I never listed my condo. Silence. "Would you like to cancel the showing then?" I hung up. I couldn't breathe. They weren't just trying to humiliate me. They were trying to erase me, piece by piece. They didn't just want to humiliate me. They wanted to erase me. Erase every boundary I'd worked to build. Erase my independence. Erase me from the family, the legacy, and now, even from my own property. I opened my laptop with hands still trembling, the screen glowing too brightly in the dim room. The cursor blinked at me like it was daring me to take back control. I didn't hesitate. New email. To gregory.bennett@lawfirmkeo.com. Subject: Urgent. Hi Gregory. We met briefly last November at the community legal brunch. I hope you remember me. I think my parents are trying to illegally sell my home. I just received a call from a realtor about a walkthrough I never scheduled. They have a key I didn't authorize. I need legal advice immediately. Please let me know when we can talk. Evelyn. I hit send. Then I grabbed my coat. By noon, I was standing outside my East Austin condo with a locksmith named Ray. The Texas sun was merciless, hammering down on my back while he studied the doorknob. "Yep," he muttered. "Someone's been using this. Scratches are fresh. Looks like they didn't know exactly how to insert the key. Not you, I'm guessing?" "No," I said, through clenched teeth. "Not me." "Want me to change the locks?" "Yes, and add a deadbolt, too." He nodded, pulling tools from his kit. I leaned against the hallway wall, watching his hands work while mine shook in my pockets. It wasn't a break-in. There was no sign of forced entry, no splintered frame, no smashed glass. It was access, familiar, casual, the kind that makes your skin crawl. That night, the air inside the condo smelled of lubricant oil and warm metal. The new locks gleamed faintly under the hallway light. I sat on the couch without turning on the TV. No music, no background noise, just the hum of my thoughts, the echo of betrayal. I reheated some leftover soup, but it sat untouched on the counter. I couldn't bring myself to eat. I just paced, then sat, then paced again. Sleep never came. Every shadow felt like a threat, every creak in the building like another intrusion. In the morning, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Let's talk. Evelyn. From Margaret. I stared at the screen. The message was short. We love you. This has gone far enough. Please come by the house today. Just us. Let's fix this. Mom, I read it twice. 3 times. No mention of the attempted condo sale. No apology. Just a gentle nudge toward family peace. But something inside me, that small flicker of hope that hadn't completely burned out, whispered, what if they meant it? What if they really wanted to fix this? So, at 2:15, I pulled into the driveway of the house I used to call home. The front lawn looked perfect, as always. Every blade of grass trimmed, every flower bed lined with solar lights, the porch swing still and silent beneath the awning. But the air felt staged, too quiet, too practiced. The front door opened before I even knocked. Evelyn, sweetheart, Margaret said, her arms already outstretched. She pulled me into a hug, one that was 3 degrees too cold, too quick, false. Thank you for coming, she added with a too wide smile. I stepped inside. The living room had been curated, that was the only word for it. Fresh orchids sat in a crystal vase on the coffee table. A tray of lemon tea and shortbread cookies, my favorite, waited, perfectly arranged. Framed photos lined the walls, but not the usual ones. These were hand-picked. Me and Dominic as kids at the lake, my high school debate finals. That blurry picture from a science fair, all strategically nostalgic. It felt like a museum exhibit. See, we love her. Look at the memories. Dominic was perched on the edge of the couch, hands folded, mouth tight. He didn't look up when I entered. He didn't speak. No sign of Camilla. Just the 3 of us. This is just us, Margaret said again, gesturing to the armchair I used to sit in every Christmas. We want to make things right. I didn't sit. Walter came around the corner from the hallway, holding a manila envelope like it was a peace treaty. He gave me a smile I couldn't read, somewhere between confident and smug. We've been thinking, he said, about how to avoid any more misunderstandings. Margaret's hands folded primly in her lap. We just want everything to be clear, sweetheart, so no one gets hurt again. Walter extended the envelope toward me. What is this? I asked, already knowing. Just a simple agreement to make sure everything is documented, fair and square. You know, a formality. I opened it. Thick paper, clean font, legal tone, deed transfer agreement, asset clarification, internal arrangement, mutual understanding. I flipped to the signature line. You're asking me to sign over the condo? Margaret's smile didn't falter. It's just a house, Evelyn. You don't need all that space by yourself, Walter chimed in. Don't you trust us? I closed the folder and set it down. Gently, just left of the untouched tea. You staged this like a reconciliation, I said, voice calm. The cookies, the photos, the flowers. You wanted me to feel like I was coming home. We are home, Margaret insisted, voice tightening. No, I said, standing tall. This isn't home. This is a performance, and I'm done being the only one who doesn't know the script. I turned to the door. I'm not signing anything. Not today, not ever. You're being dramatic, Walter snapped. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Number, I'm being free. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I left. Back in my car, I didn't turn the ignition right away. I sat still, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, letting the tension drain slowly from my shoulders. My breath came in shallow bursts. I stared at the house, the same house where I once played hopscotch on the driveway, where I'd learned to ride a bike and kissed scraped knees. And yet, it felt like enemy territory now. I didn't belong inside anymore, not because I walked away, but because they'd quietly, methodically pushed me out. I opened my phone and scrolled past texts from Jasmine, who'd offered to let me crash anytime, past a voicemail from Gregory, the lawyer I'd spoken with weeks ago, just in case. I tapped his number. He answered on the second ring. "Evelyn." "I'm ready," I said, voice steady. There was a pause. Then, "You want to move forward?" "Yes. File everything." "Okay," he replied, with the calm certainty I needed. "You still hold the deed to their house. You have every right to act." That evening, I sat in Jasmine's spare room, surrounded by a fortress of pillows and the gentle hum of the air conditioner. A mug of mint tea steamed beside me on the windowsill. I stared at the eviction notice Gregory had drafted, reading each line like it was a novel in another language. The house they had weaponized against me, the same house I had paid for, rescued from foreclosure in 2010 without ever transferring the title back, was still legally mine. They hadn't even thought to ask for it. They assumed I'd just give. Assumed I'd keep giving. Always. Until I gave everything. But they were wrong. I folded the notice carefully and slid it into a manila envelope. I addressed it to 216 Willow Crest Lane. I didn't feel rage, not bitterness either, only clarity. 3 days later, the sheriff delivered the eviction order. I wasn't there to see it happen. But I didn't need to be. Dominic, my brother, always the one to document life like it was a curated Instagram story, captured it on their home security camera. And just like that, he uploaded it to the extended family group chat with no caption, just the raw footage. The video was shaky, clearly from a phone screen recording. It showed Walter, my father, answering the door in a worn-out robe, clutching half a bagel. His face was puffy, like he'd just woken up. Behind him, Margaret hovered, her hand curled around a ceramic mug, frozen mid-sip. The sheriff was calm, professional. He handed over the envelope, sealed, official, and though the audio was faint, you could make out the words, "You've been served." Walter blinked at the paper like it was written in fire. Margaret's lips thinned, the mug lowering slowly, trembling in her grip. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was sharp. "This has to be a mistake." But it wasn't. Not legally, not emotionally, not karmically. They'd lived there rent-free for over a decade while I covered taxes, repairs, utilities, quietly, faithfully, because I believed that's what family did. Until they decided I wasn't family anymore. The video ended with Margaret slamming the door. I watched it twice, then I closed the group chat and deleted my account. That night, I curled up in Jasmine's guest bed, the video echoing in my mind like a bedtime story told in reverse, a tale not of who I lost, but of what I reclaimed. The night after the eviction, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no music, no champagne, no symbolic burning of old photographs, just me, a quiet condo, and a cup of lukewarm tea. I sat at the dining table, the one I bought secondhand back when I got my first job out of college, running my fingers along the edge of a folded napkin. It wasn't fancy, just soft linen with a faint blue thread at the hem. The same kind I'd used during the party, the same kind Margaret had folded into limp swans at my place setting, the same kind I found packed among their kitchen things when I stopped by earlier to confirm the lock change. They had taken everything they cared about, the heirloom china, the crystal glasses, the family portraits I was never in. But they left the swan. Or maybe they meant to throw it out and simply forgot. Either way, it was mine now. The lights in the condo were dimmed. Outside, the city hummed on, cars zipping past, a distant siren, someone's television echoing through an open window. Inside, everything was still, stillness like soil before it blooms. stillness like a woman who finally stopped shrinking to fit a mold she never asked for. My phone buzzed once. A message from Camilla. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time. She had never said much, always the observer, not the participant. But this time, her words didn't feel empty. They felt like a small door opening. I typed back, "I will be." Camilla's message stayed on my screen as I set the phone down beside the folded napkin. The words echoed softly in my mind. Not a lifeline, but maybe something quieter. A small anchor in a sea that had been shifting under me for years. I rose from the table, walking to the window where the city lights blinked like distant thoughts. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Older, yes, but not worn out. Just reshaped. Then another notification popped up. A voicemail from Gregory, my lawyer. I hadn't expected a call this late, so I played it right away. "Evelyn, it's official. The sale of the house closed this afternoon. The funds have been wired to your account. Everything's final. You're free." I sank into the nearest chair, letting the words settle. You're free. Not just from the building, from the expectation, from the twisted definitions of love and loyalty that had cost me so much of myself. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just exhaled, slow and deep, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to let it go. The condo around me felt warmer somehow, not because the heat was on, but because, for the first time in my life, the space I was in didn't require permission. The space was mine, and if they couldn't give it, they could give me space, because I was done standing outside the life I paid for, waiting to be seen. The next voicemail from Camilla wasn't angry, not at first. Her voice was soft, almost sweet, the kind of tone someone uses when they're trying to sound concerned, but really just fishing for control. "Evelyn, we're really worried about you. This isn't like you. Please, let's just talk. You don't have to do anything drastic." Drastic. That's what she called walking away. Not cruel, not hurt, not humiliated. Just drastic. Like I was being irrational. Like I was the one disrupting something sacred. The guilt started creeping in, not as a flood, but a slow dripping leak. Subtle, familiar. "You know Dominic has a lot on his plate right now," she went on. "Work is stressful. I'm doing my best to keep things together at home. We're just really missing you." Missing me? The woman who ate leftovers in the kitchen while they toasted champagne, who folded laundry while they hosted game nights, who got a bruised temple for refusing to give away her home. I didn't respond. The next message came hours later, a little sharper, a little less sweet. "It's honestly kind of unfair what you're doing," Camilla said. "Dominic doesn't need this kind of stress. We're trying to figure things out. But you disappearing and cutting us off? It's not okay." I sat at the edge of the bed, watching sunlight crawl across the rug like it was measuring how far I'd come. "Unfair," she'd said, as if I owed them presents after they tried to steal my silence. Unfair. That was the word they chose. Not a single mention of what had been unfair to me, the years of giving, of biting my tongue while being spoken over, of being treated like the maid in a house I paid for. That word sat heavy in my chest, not because it hurt, but because of how lightly they threw it around, how quickly they turned my boundary into a burden. I put the phone down, its screen glowing with that last message. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the notebook I'd started days ago. Not a diary. This wasn't for reflection or catharsis. This was documentation, proof, planning. The front page had names and dates. The second, bank transfers. By the third, I was outlining every time I had covered a bill, paid for repairs, or stepped in to help while Dominic and Camilla swore they were just figuring things out. Every small kindness I had once seen as love now appeared in the sharp light of truth, unpaid labor, unquestioned sacrifice, and a steady erasure of my place in the family. And the more I wrote, the clearer it became. Without me, the wheels weren't turning, and they were just beginning to notice. That night, I didn't plan my return. I planned my rise. I made myself a cup of black tea and sat by the kitchen window, letting it steep longer than usual. The condensation on the glass blurred the view outside, like it was trying to spare me the sharp outlines of a world that had shifted overnight. At 9:32 a.m., I parked outside Gregory's office. Downtown was already humming, but inside the building it was cold and still. Gregory met me with a nod and a folder already in hand. "I reviewed everything last night," he said. "They've left a mess, but here's the good news. You still hold the deed to the house they're living in." I blinked. "You sure?" He flipped to the second page, tapping the signature line with his pen. "You bought it in 2011, remember? It was a foreclosure. You helped them when the bank was ready to take everything. They never transferred it back. They've been living there on assumption and your generosity." I leaned back in the chair, letting the information settle like warm oil. I had given them a lifeline, and they turned it into a noose. Gregory offered me a quiet look, a question without words. I nodded. I took the pen. Back at home, I didn't feel triumph, just direction. This wasn't vengeance. I had already given them enough of my heart, my time, my money. This was surgical, quiet, final. Gregory filed the notice to vacate that afternoon. We didn't call them. No big speeches, no family intervention, no public scene, just a manila envelope. Because justice in real life isn't loud, it's legal. Gregory filed the notice to vacate that afternoon. We didn't notify them. There were no dramatic warnings, no shouting matches in parking lots, no staged interventions with extended family clapping like a live audience. This wasn't a reality show. This was real life, and real life hits back in envelopes. 3 days later, the sheriff delivered the eviction order. I didn't see it in person, but Roman, ever the curator of digital drama, shared the footage in our family group chat like a last-ditch cry for sympathy. It came from the old security camera mounted above the garage, grainy and stuttered, but unmistakably real. The video showed Everett answering the front door, barefoot in a sagging robe, half a piece of toast in one hand. He blinked at the sheriff as if the morning sun had somehow burned his reality. Ivy appeared behind him, a steaming mug frozen midair, her lips parted in a soundless question. The sheriff, steady and professional, handed over the sealed envelope. Everett opened it. His eyes darted left, then right, before he slapped the document against the hallway wall so hard it bounced and fell to the floor. The video cut out just as Ivy's face twisted. Rage, disbelief, something animalistic, and she lunged toward the camera. That was Roman's final cinematic touch. I watched it once, then again. Then I powered my phone off and placed it face down. That night, I sat in my condo with all the lights off. No music, no TV, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sigh from the vents. I sipped warm chamomile tea, sweetened with honey, and let the stillness wrap around me like a soft blanket. I didn't cry, I didn't pace, I didn't raise a glass in triumph. I just breathed. The next morning, I woke to the faint blue light of my phone screen blinking on the nightstand. A new message. Not from Ivy, not from Everett, and certainly not from Roman. It was from Lila. They've done worse than you know. Attached was a photo. I hesitated before tapping it open. It was a picture of an old family album, the one I hadn't seen since college, its leather cover frayed at the corners, pages yellowing with age. But this wasn't nostalgia. It was proof. Photo after photo spread across the frame. Smiling faces, birthday candles, graduation gowns, beach vacations. But not one included me. Not one. There were empty chairs where I should have been, cropped frames that once had me in them. Gaps that were too deliberate to be accidents. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had edited me out. Piece by piece, year by year. Lila's next message came quickly. They've been erasing you from the inside out. It wasn't just at the party. My breath caught. I typed back slowly, deliberately. Thank you. For finally showing me what I've always felt but could never prove. Then I put the phone down and let the truth thud into me like a final book slammed shut. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was rewritten, and that realization, chilling and cruel, carried more weight than any champagne bottle ever could. The next morning, I woke up with a strange stillness in my chest, a calm not from peace, but from clarity. Like the fog had finally lifted, and I could see the landscape of my past for what it truly was, not a story of misunderstanding, but of deliberate betrayal. I don't know why I checked social media. Maybe I already knew something was coming. A storm always sends out a chill before it arrives. There it was, a video Delora had posted, a polished, tightly edited montage. My voice cracked mid-sentence from the party. Not the whole toast, just the part where I said, "This wasn't agreed on." Then a hard cut to a smiling Roman and Ivy laughing with guests, champagne flutes raised in a toast. The caption read, "We raised her with love." We never expected betrayal. Hashtags floated beneath. Nemedakina family first, on just heartbreak. None when your own turns. I didn't have to open the comments to know what they said. Ungrateful. She's selfish. There are two sides to every story. They weren't just spinning the narrative. They were launching a campaign. They made me the villain in the same house I once helped keep from falling apart. But I didn't feel rage. I didn't shake. Instead, I opened my Dropbox and uploaded everything. Bank statements, from my account to theirs. The original deed of the condo, dated and notarized. Emails about the loan I gave Roman for his business. Voicemails from Ivy asking for help covering their utilities. No title, no hashtags, no angry rants. Just a folder called, "If You Care to Know the Truth." And then I closed the laptop and made myself a cup of tea, because I didn't owe them fury. I owed myself freedom. That night, I sat in my condo, lights dimmed low, sipping chamomile with honey. My phone was face down on the counter, screen black, no music humming in the background, no Netflix buffering a distraction. Just quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, it feels whole. Outside, the city moved on. Cars sped past my window. A dog barked once, then again, then silence. Someone a block away played slow jazz from their balcony. And here I was, alone, but not lonely. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't bracing myself for the next blow. I wasn't waiting for an apology that wouldn't come. I wasn't hoping they'd understand what they'd done. I had stopped asking to be understood. Then my phone buzzed once. I almost didn't turn it over, but something in the quiet nudged me. When I flipped it, I saw the name. Ivy, not Roman, not anyone else. Her. The message was short. "They've done worse than you know." It didn't come with a long apology, just a photo, a picture of an old family album, leather-bound and weathered. She'd taken a snapshot of it lying open on her lap. Page after page of family moments, birthday cakes, beach trips, graduations, all of them neatly labeled, but none of them had me in them. It wasn't just that I had been pushed away. They had erased me, as if I was never there. Her next message came seconds later. They've been erasing you for years, even from memory. I sat with that truth, unmoving, the silence around me swelling, not because I was surprised, but because I finally had proof that I hadn't imagined it. I typed back, "Thank you for showing me what I always felt but could never prove." I tapped the image attached again, just to be sure. The dusty photo album, the missing pages of my childhood, meant to confirm not only my place, but my erasure. I wasn't just edited out, I was scrubbed from the record like an ink stain on silk. I set the phone down, gently, like it might crack if I held it too tightly. And then I whispered, not in anger or grief, but with an eerie clarity. So I wasn't just invisible, I was deleted. It struck harder than the champagne bottle ever had. I didn't text Ivy back again that night. I didn't need to. Her gesture was enough. In a family that had specialized in silence, her act of naming the truth was a revolution. The next morning, I woke with that message still on my mind. I moved slowly through my kitchen, steeping tea, slicing a banana, not for nourishment, but for rhythm, a kind of quiet therapy that reminded me I was still here, still real, even if the pages of my life had been torn from someone else's storybook. I don't know why I checked social media. Some part of me, I think, was already bracing, and there it was. Delora had posted a video. It was a stitched-together piece of artfully cruel propaganda. It opened with a shaky clip from the birthday party, the part where I was caught off guard on stage, voice trembling, saying, "This wasn't agreed on." The camera zoomed slightly, not enough to distort, just enough to dramatize. Then the images came, Roman laughing with a balloon, Delora raising a toast, me standing there awkwardly, a ghost among golden people. The caption read, "We raised her with love." We never expected betrayal. Hashtag spilled below like blood in water. Yash family matters, darn broken hearts, alk daughter of strangers. I didn't open the comments. The preview was enough. Ungrateful. We need the full story. Some kids are just never satisfied. They weren't just writing me out anymore. They were rewriting the entire story, with me as the villain. I didn't flinch. I didn't slam my laptop shut or throw my phone across the room. Instead, I opened my Dropbox. Inside was a folder I had quietly curated over the years. I named it something simple, something unassuming. Receipts. One by one, I dragged the files in. Bank records showing the $75,000 I'd wired to Roman for his firm's launch. The original deed to the condo, signed solely by me. Email threads of me covering family debts, just this once. A voicemail from Delora herself, softly requesting that I front the mortgage again that month because Roman's bonus was delayed. No commentary, no call to arms, no righteous anger typed in bold, just a shared link titled, "Truth if you care to see it." I pasted it quietly in a single post of my own, no hashtags, no caption, just the link, and then I logged off. That evening, I didn't cook dinner. I didn't clean or even touch my phone. I sat at the dining table with a glass of water and watched the fading sun draw crooked shadows across the walls. My home was still, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for an apology, a message, or a reconciliation. I was just present, and it felt like peace. Later that night, I opened a dusty plastic bin I hadn't looked into in years. Inside was an old photo album I'd made for myself back in high school, one that hadn't been curated for show or edited for image. There I was, crooked teeth and braces, my first school debate win. A blurry prom photo in a floral dress I hated, but it was real, and more importantly, I was in it. Midway through the album, tucked between 2 pages, was a sticky note with Dad's handwriting. Kez, knew you had it in you. Proud of you, kid. Dad. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just folded the note, closed the album, and whispered into the quiet, "You did love me once. But that doesn't excuse who you are now." The next morning, I woke up with a strange kind of stillness in my chest, the kind you feel after a storm when all that's left is the wet ground and the silence. No thunder, no wind, just the echo of what you survived. I made tea, no sugar, no honey, just black and strong, and stood by the window as the early light poured in. The steam curled around my face, comforting, grounding. My phone lay on the counter, face down. I hadn't checked it all night. Then curiosity won. I picked it up, expecting maybe a message from Amina or a new email from Marlo. But what I found was something far stranger. Delora had posted a video, not on her private page, not in a family group, but publicly, for the world to see. A carefully edited clip from the birthday party. It started with a smiling Roman, balloons behind him, and soft piano music playing under his voice. Then it cut, abruptly, to me. My voice cracked as I said, "This wasn't agreed on." That was all they included. That one vulnerable moment sliced from the full speech, stripped of context, and played like a betrayal. The caption below it read, "We raised her with love. We never expected betrayal." Family first. Josh truth hurts not our daughters. The hashtag spilled down like dripping wax. I didn't look at the comments. But the preview said enough. Ungrateful. There's always one selfish kid. Some children are just never satisfied. I didn't cry. I didn't clench my fists. I just exhaled, calm and slow. Then I turned to the thing that had always served me better than tears or fury. Evidence. I opened my Dropbox, selected the folder. Truth, if you care to see it. And updated the settings to public. That afternoon, the folder was circulating, quietly, privately, through DMS group texts, screenshots, no commentary from me, just proof. Let the truth speak louder than their fiction. That afternoon, I went through an old storage bin I hadn't touched in years. Dust clung to the lid like memories nobody wanted to remember. Inside were mismatched keepsakes, college notebooks, a faded hoodie from senior year, a chipped mug with a quote I no longer believed in. But nestled beneath it all was something I hadn't expected, my old high school photo album. It was wrapped in a crumbling paper bag, the edges soft from time and handling. I opened it slowly, almost reverently, flipping through the glossy pages. There I was, smiling crookedly at age 12, braces gleaming, standing in front of a band trophy, too tall for me to carry, awkwardly posing in the floral prom dress I had begged Mom not to choose, yet wore anyway, just to keep the peace. Each photo whispered, "You existed. You were loved. You mattered." And then I found it, tucked in the center, like a pressed flower, a sticky note, written in my dad's familiar slanted print, "Kez, knew you had it in you. Proud of you, kid." Dad. My throat tightened. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared. That small note was from another lifetime, another version of him, one before the greed, the manipulation, the erasure. He had loved me once, but love without respect becomes a tool, and theirs had become a weapon. I placed the note back carefully and closed the album. Then, to the silence of my apartment, I said it aloud. "You did love me once. But that doesn't excuse who you are now." That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from a name I hadn't seen in years, Uncle Marvin, my mother's older brother, He'd been estranged from the family for nearly a decade after a falling out nobody would ever explain. His text was short. Saw the folder. About time someone told the truth. If you need a witness, I'm here. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe not every bridge had burned. Maybe the house hadn't collapsed completely. Maybe the cracks just needed time to show themselves, and finally, they were. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe the glass house didn't shatter all at once. Maybe it was breaking piece by piece, truth by truth, witness by witness. And Uncle Marvin? He wasn't just another voice. He had been there, at the birthdays, the holidays, the nights I came home crying from school because the other kids made fun of my clothes. He used to sneak me little wrapped presents, just because. I typed slowly. Thank you. I might need your help. I'm finally ready to tell it all. He responded with just a thumbs up emoji, but it felt like a hug. The next morning, I drove down the familiar road without music, just the quiet hum of tires on pavement and the occasional flicker of morning sunlight through the windshield. I wasn't rushing. There was no urgency, no dread, just resolve. When I pulled up to the house, the moving truck was already there, big, loud, and unapologetically blocking the driveway. Its wide-open doors yawned like a final chapter waiting to be written. The realtor stood by the gate in a navy blazer and flats, clipboard in hand, efficient and unbothered. The workers were hauling boxes out of the garage, none of them labeled, none of them fragile. These weren't keepsakes, these were leftovers, items that hadn't been deemed important enough to take when my parents had packed up and left after the eviction notice arrived. All that remained now were pieces they didn't care about. I stepped out of my car. No drama, no hesitation, just purpose. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and something else, nostalgia maybe, or grief with nowhere left to land. The realtor gave me a professional smile. We'll be out in under 2 hours, she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Cleaning crew follows right after. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer condolences, and I appreciated that. I wasn't here for sympathy, I was here for closure. I walked up the front steps, slowly, deliberately. My fingers grazed the railing, still chipped where I had once slipped coming home from junior prom. The air felt heavier the closer I got, thick with memories, both cherished and bruised. This was the house that had once held sleepovers and spilled juice boxes. My name etched into the sidewalk out front with a stick when I was 6. Now it echoed with absence. Inside, the rooms were hollow, walls bare, no paintings, no photos. Even the dusty outline where the family portrait used to hang seemed embarrassed to still be there. The windows had been left open, letting in too much light, like the house was being exorcised of its past. I walked through the rooms I knew better than the lines on my own palm. The kitchen still had the scar on the cabinet Dad never fixed. The living room corner where I used to curl up with books was now empty, save for a lone dust bunny dancing in a shaft of light. And then, in the kitchen, I saw it, a plain white envelope, my name printed on it in stiff typed letters. It was the kind of envelope you get from the DMV or a credit collector. Not warm, not loving. I picked it up with 2 fingers and opened it. Inside, just one sentence. This was never your home anyway. No signature. No explanation. Just venom on printer paper. I folded it in half once, then again. Slid it into the side pocket of my coat without another glance. I didn't cry. I didn't clench my fists. I'd expected it. That was the worst part. The weight of the letter didn't hit me all at once. It sank slowly, like sediment in a glass of water, suspending itself between logic and emotion. I moved through the house, a ghost among ghosts, revisiting each room like a silent farewell, The hallway closet still smelled faintly of lavender dryer sheets and dust. I pulled it open, more from muscle memory than hope. It was mostly empty, but tucked beneath a pile of yellowing newspaper bundles and a broken umbrella was a small wooden door, the kind that never had a purpose, just as space builders carve into houses without knowing why. I knelt down and opened it. A single shoebox sat inside, covered in a delicate sheet of dust like snow on old wood. I pulled it out and set it on the kitchen island. The light from the window hit it just right, illuminating the faded edges and the initials written in thick black marker. M. That was me, short for Maya, back before anyone used my full name unless they were mad at me. I opened the lid slowly. Inside was a photo. I was 8 years old, hair pulled back into uneven braids, grinning through a missing front tooth, holding a clumsy science trophy taller than my forearms. My volcano project had exploded mid-demonstration, but I'd won first place anyway because of creativity and heart. I remembered standing alone on the cafeteria stage, lights too bright, no one in the crowd cheering louder than me. Behind the photo, folded like a forgotten relic, was a napkin. Not just any napkin, the swan. The one they'd left limply folded at table 18 near the kitchen door at Laszlo's birthday. The one I'd straightened with trembling hands while guests laughed across the ballroom. I ran my fingers along its creased edges, soft now, almost falling apart, but unmistakably the same. Why they kept it, I didn't know. Guilt, spite, or just oversight. But it didn't matter. It was here, and it was mine. I closed the lid and held it to my chest for a breath. Just one. Then I stepped outside, the sun catching in the kitchen window like a curtain rising after the final act. The realtor looked up. I held out the box. "This stays with me," I said. She nodded without question. Some things don't need explanation. And yet it wasn't. The house that had once held every shade of my childhood, Sunday crossword puzzles, burnt cookies in the oven, midnight phone calls after heartbreaks, was now just wood and drywall, a hollow monument to everything I had tried to hold together. Then I saw it on the kitchen counter, a letter, my name typed cleanly on the front, not handwritten, not personal, just blocky, indifferent font like you'd see on a water bill or eviction notice. I opened it without hesitation, already numb. Inside were just 7 words. This was never your home anyway. No signature, no warmth, just that, like a final slap from someone too cowardly to look me in the eye. I folded it once, then again, tucking it into my coat pocket without a word. My fingers were steady. That surprised me. I turned toward the front door, ready to walk out without fanfare. But something made me stop. The hallway cabinet. There was a tiny door beneath the stairs, one I hadn't thought of in years. It creaked as I opened it, hinges stiff like they hadn't moved in a decade. Inside was one item, a dusty shoebox. I carried it back to the kitchen, set it on the counter beside the empty letter, opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Me, no one else. 8 years old, missing tooth, science fair medal around my neck. I'd won with a homemade volcano, vinegar and baking soda bubbling over while Mom was too busy to attend, and Dad said he couldn't get away from work. Behind the photo, carefully tucked and faded with time, was a cloth swan napkin, the very same kind they left for me at that party. That single, drooping token of an invitation to a table I was never welcome at. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. I didn't sob. I just smiled, barely, and whispered to the empty room, "I see you." And I remember everything. Then I stepped out the front door. I didn't turn back. Outside, the wind picked up. Light filtered between clouds, scattering gold onto the sidewalk. the box clutched under my arm, the napkin carefully folded beside the picture. It was all I needed from that place. I handed the shoebox to the realtor without flinching. "This comes with me," I said again. And then I got into my car, drove away. No music, no tears, just the sound of the tires humming beneath me and the faint echo of silence in the passenger seat, just a parting shot on a piece of standard printer paper. I folded it once more, then again, and slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat like it weighed nothing. But it did. It was heavier than any gift they had ever given me, because it carried the full weight of truth they had always hidden behind silver cutlery and polite smiles. As I turned to leave for the last time, something stopped me. The hallway cabinet, that little wooden door tucked beneath the staircase, had always been the kind of place we shoved things we didn't want to deal with. Mismatched shoes, forgotten umbrellas, sometimes secrets. I hesitated, then opened it. There it was. A small, unassuming shoebox coated in dust, like it had been waiting for years. I pulled it out gently and carried it to the kitchen island. Inside was a photo. I was 8, grinning with crooked pigtails, one front tooth missing, holding a plastic trophy taller than my arms could reach. I'd won the science fair. I remember that day, standing alone on stage because no one in my family had come. They were busy. Too busy to see me shine. But someone had taken this photo. I hadn't seen it in decades. And beneath the picture, folded delicately like pressed linen, was a swan napkin. Not just any napkin. The napkin. The one from Lazaro's birthday dinner. The one they had set at the end of table 18 by the kitchen, folded lazily like I didn't matter. I had touched it with trembling hands, trying to make it sit upright, to feel like I belonged. They kept it. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe nothing, maybe guilt, or maybe somewhere, someone knew what they had done. I held the napkin for a long time. Then I closed the lid, tucked the photo and napkin back inside, and pressed the cover down with care. I walked to the door and handed the box to the realtor, who had been quietly waiting nearby. "This stays with me," I said simply. She nodded without question, and I left. No final glance, no dramatic pause, just the sound of my heels on the path and the wind moving through the trees like it was sweeping the house clean behind me. A single shoebox sat inside, unmarked, covered in a fine layer of dust. I brought it to the kitchen island and lifted the lid slowly. Inside was a photograph. I was 8, hair in uneven pigtails, missing a front tooth, holding a science trophy taller than my arms could wrap around. I'd forgotten about that day. I had won first place for a homemade volcano that actually erupted with foam and vinegar. No one else was in the photo. I remember standing on stage alone. Behind that picture, folded carefully like a pressed flower, was one of my swan-shaped napkins. It wasn't a replica. It was one of mine from that dinner party, the one they'd left crooked on the table by the kitchen door, the same one I had straightened with shaking hands, trying to feel like I belonged. I didn't know what it meant that they kept it. Maybe nothing, maybe guilt, maybe someone had meant to throw it out and just forgot. But it was still here, and it was mine. I closed the lid and held it to my chest for a moment. Just one. Then I stepped outside and handed it to the realtor. "This stays with me." She nodded without asking. Sometimes people know when a thing carries more than dust. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back. Not at the porch. Not at the roof I once helped patch. Not even at the door they used to stand in every Thanksgiving, waving goodbye with empty hands. I didn't need to. That night, back in my condo, the lights were off. I sat in the kitchen with the box beside me, the swan napkin in my lap, my fingers smoothing its edges. My phone buzzed. A message from Marlo. The sale's final. Funds wired. You're free. I stared at the words for a long time. Not because I didn't believe them, but because part of me didn't remember what freedom felt like. Then I looked at the swan. The same folds, the same edges, the same paper. I whispered into the quiet. They gave me back everything by trying to take it all. The morning light streamed through my condo windows like it hadn't in years, clean, calm, unobstructed. I set the folded swan napkin gently at the center of the dining table, the same one I had found in that forgotten cabinet. That soft, creased linen felt like a whisper from an older version of myself, a quiet promise kept, not by them, but by me. The room around me was still. My kitchen smelled of cinnamon and fresh polish. For the first time, I wasn't waiting on a call, an apology, or permission to feel peace. The silence didn't press on me anymore. It wrapped around me like a soft shawl. Then the envelope came tucked in a pile of mail. It was cream-colored and thick, my name handwritten in cursive across the front. I recognized Celeste's handwriting before I even opened it. Inside, a baby shower invitation, formal, tasteful, and then at the bottom, a quick scrawl. I'm sorry. I didn't know how far they went. You deserved better. Celeste. No flourish, no excuses, just acknowledgement. And a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying lifted slightly. I stared at the card for a long while. Not out of indecision, just reflection. A part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part, a wiser, more weathered part, knew the cost of burning bridges for smoke that wouldn't warm me anyway. So instead, I wrote a check to the local women's shelter. In the memo line, I wrote, "In honor of a new beginning," and I didn't attend the shower. Some cycles don't need to end with screaming. Some stories don't require fire. Silence, when chosen, is its own revolution. That evening, I cooked dinner. Just a simple pasta dish with garlic and thyme. I set 2 plates, not out of habit, but intention. Amina arrived 15 minutes later, arms full, a bottle of wine in one hand, a tiny orchid in the other. "You need more green in here," she said, placing it by the window like she'd always lived here. We ate slowly, like people who had nothing to prove to time. The conversation wandered from work to books to a show she swore I'd love, and I swore I'd never start. At some point, I looked at the swan on my table. It wasn't fancy. Its edges were soft now. The crease not as crisp as the ones I used to fold for family parties, trying to impress people who never truly saw me. But this one sat alone, and it was enough. I thought about the girl I used to be, hiding in corners at events, smiling too wide when ignored, folding napkins like origami shields. And I thought about the woman I had become, not cold, not cruel, just complete. I turned to Amina, refilled our glasses, and raised mine slightly. "To building our own tables," I said. She clinked her glass to mine and replied, "And never begging for a seat again." That night, I didn't think about what they lost. I thought about what I reclaimed, not just property or dignity, but presence, identity, a quiet kind of power no eviction or lie could ever touch again. And that, I decided, was worth more than any inheritance they ever withheld. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from the people who raised us. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice, your space, and your peace. To anyone listening, have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your soul? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you believe in healing through truth and quiet strength, subscribe for more stories like this.